Hello and welcome to Race Streamer, and in this video I'm going to be talking about this guy and how I had a conversation about entering motorsport with him back in November. So that was a clip of Rick Parfitt Jr. racing the Bentley at the British GT at Brands Hatch back in 2016. Now, I managed to get in contact with Rick Parfitt Jr. because of a experience day that I did at Lotus in Hethel, where I had Rob Bath as one of my driving instructors, much to my surprise. And I had a good conversation with Rob on the day, and he asked me if I was interested in entering motorsport, and I told him that I'm a musician, and he said off the back of that that I should get in contact with Rick, as he'd be happy to talk to me about getting into motorsport, which I was a little bit surprised about, to be honest. So off the back of that, I then managed to call Rick and have a bit of a chat with him about entering motorsport and what his opinions on the best route into car racing is. So Rick's background, he details to me, is in karting, and he did a lot of endurance karting to start off with, especially when he was younger. He was actually racing alongside Lewis Hamilton at some points, as far as I understand. And then from there, he progressed into car racing. And the things that he had to say on the subjects there were that his route into car racing was through Ginetta. So Rick started out in the Ginetta GT5s, and that's how he said that he had a good route into the British GT Championship from there, because the Ginetta GT5s is one of the support races to the British GT Championship. And he definitely recommended, especially in terms of selling it to sponsors, that if you're going to enter motorsport, if you manage to get onto a championship that supports a really desirable championship, say you're on a championship that supports the British touring cars or the British GT, he was saying that it's much easier to sell that to sponsors and try and secure yourself funding for motorsport than it is to enter, say, a BRSCC meeting, which is sad in itself because the BRSCC looks like great championships. It's just, at the end of the day, it comes down to money, and if you can sell yourself to sponsors and get yourself into motorsport that way. So the other thing that me and Rick talked about was actually how to sell yourself to sponsors, because at this point I hadn't had a chat with anyone in the industry at all about actually securing sponsorship, so it's good to find out his perspective and his approach on how he managed to secure himself sponsorship over the years, especially because he said his season when he was racing the Bentleys in the British GT was costing hundreds of thousands of pounds. So yeah, I think it's kind of important to secure yourself sponsorship at that stage. So Rick said that his approach to getting sponsors wasn't to sell himself as such, and not necessarily to sell them how well he can promote their brand and sell their products, but actually it was to single out just really wealthy business owners that are a single owner, so there's no board of directors within these businesses. And what he did when he spoke to these individual business owners is he tried to sell the championship and the kind of hospitality packages that were on offer with these championships and the glamorous side of motorsport. So for him, he was approaching these individual business owners and trying to sell them the facts that they can go and park their supercar with the other supercar owners that turn up to the meets. They can get champagne served in the media suites of the Ginetta hospitality, for example. So trying to sell the glamour side of it more than how it would actually be a viable business venture for them necessarily. So trying to sell the fun factor rather than the money growing factor. It was interesting to hear about that, because pretty much every other video I've seen on how to secure sponsorship doesn't talk about the fun factor. It just talks about how you can justify it because it actually is kind of beneficial to both you and the business owner. There's some sort of synergy in making money through it that way. So off the back of that, it made me think about what my plans are going to be to try and get into motorsport, and how I definitely don't know how I'm going to approach sponsors as of yet, whether I'm going to go in with the angle of fun factor or money factor or a bit of both. I'll have to figure that out depending on who the individual sponsor I approach is. But what I do know for a fact is that Rick suggested to get into some karting before car racing. So what I'm going to be doing this year is I've entered the season of Club 100, which is a national karting championship for rental karts So you just arrive and drive in their own karts, which are really well prepared, I have to say, after I tested one at Buckmore Park a few weeks ago. And alongside that, I'm also going to be racing, or at least competing, in the Japanese Sprint Series in my car, which is a Toyota GT86. And that's think of it like a time trials championship, where you just set a single lap around the circuit, and I think the championship visits Snetterton and the first rounds of Cadwell Park. So it's at a few Pucker race circuits throughout the country where there are several race meetings held throughout the year. So I'm looking forward to that, and hopefully that will give me a bit of a start into motorsport where I can move up to some actual car racing next year.